Okay, thank you everyone for attending. We're going to go ahead and get started now. So yeah, welcome to today's webinar on getting started on Compose for MySQL. My name is John Silvers. I'm with Compose, and I'm one of the organizers for today's presentation. In a minute, I'll introduce today's speaker, Christopher Winslet, who is also at Compose. Today's call will be in listen-only mode. You can ask questions using the GoToWebinar panel on your screen. We will come back at the end of the presentation to answer questions if there are any. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll send everyone who registered for it the link to the recording probably end of the day today or first thing tomorrow. So I wanted to briefly introduce Compose for anyone who's watching who's not already a customer or who hasn't signed up for a trial. Compose makes it easier for developers to use production-ready databases for building apps without all the hassles of managing the databases. Each database is deployed in a high availability cluster. Chris is going to get more into some of the architectural details on that shortly for MySQL. What our customers tell us is that with Compose, they can focus on writing apps and not managing databases. We offer Compose both as a multi-tenant service on AWS, GCP, and SoftLayer. And we've been around since 2010. Back then, we were called MongoHQ, and about 2 years ago, we changed our name to Compose to reflect the fact that we host other databases besides MongoDB. I should also mention, I didn't put it here on the slide, but I should also mention that we are now, I guess, a first-class citizen on Bluemix. IBM.biz/Bluemix, or I think just bluemix.net, will get you to IBM's app developer hosting service, which now you can get Compose databases there as well. So if you're interested in more than databases, in getting a node or other kind of app deployed, you might check that out as well. We currently offer 9 databases and developer services. We released Compose for MySQL in beta in October, and of course, it's the topic of today's presentation. If you're new to Compose, your first 30 days are free, so you can try as many deployments and use as much data as you need for free. Okay, and with that, we're going to get on to today's topic. Today's presenter is Chris Winslet. He's a senior engineer here. In addition to bringing Compose for MySQL to stand alongside our other database offerings, Chris worked on our PostgreSQL product offering. So he has a great deal of experience working with the SQL databases, but also with almost all the other data services we offer. If you have any questions for him about today's topic or working with any of our other product offerings, please ask it in the GoToWebinar questions box, and we'll get to them at the end. And with that, Chris, I'm going to hand controls over to you.
Thank you, John. Let's see if I can show. All right, John, you should be able to see my screen now, correct? The introduction to Compose for MySQL?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you all for attending today. I'm Chris Winslet, and I'm one of the database team members here at Compose. I've been at Compose since we were a MongoDB only shop. So I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different types of databases, both operating those and helping customers scale those. To find out more information about MySQL today on top of Compose, if you're kind of sitting there by your computer, which I assume you are because this is a webinar, you can go to compose.com/MySQL and kind of check that out and kind of peek around, and I'll show some of the information that we have about MySQL there. But we'll go ahead and kick this off. I am Chris Winslet. This is what I look like in real life when I'm away from my computer. My Twitter handle is @Winslets. My GitHub is github.com/Winslet. I'm a member of the Compose database team. In a previous life, before I worked at Compose, I was a high school teacher for 2 years. And so what I learned to do as a high school teacher is just work through any kind of issues. So we're going to do a couple of live demos today. We're going to do a couple of just kind of moving back and forth. So just kind of as things pop up, as questions come up, if you have questions, just put them over there in the questions box, and we'll take care of them as we go. I'm kind of open and free flowing whenever I do my presentation. So I always like to have feedback and presentations while they're going on. So please ask any questions as they come up, and we'll just keep going. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's always fun to speak back with the customers and folks that use our databases and database like ours in the real world. So it's always good to have you. Thank you. So, like John said, Compose.com is a database as a service offering. So, the databases that we offered prior to 2016 were MongoDB, Elasticsearch, Rethink, Redis, Postgres, etcd, and RabbitMQ. And new in 2016 is ScalaDB and ScyllaDB and MySQL. Now, we started with MongoDB, so it's the first one listed there. We were exclusively MongoDB. While running MongoDB for customers, we became more convinced that developers need to choose the right database for the job. We were seeing customers do things in MongoDB that Mongo was just not designed for. Mongo is great and has expressive documents, but some people were using it for searches, so they were creating search engines out of it, so we launched Elasticsearch. Some people were trying to do queuing and doing basic key value store in MongoDB, so we offered Redis because Redis became is very nice for a simple queuing system and a key value store. Some people were trying to do relational data on top of Mongo and analytics, so we started offering Postgres. And then customers needed a consistent state store, which they weren't getting in any of the other databases, so we offered etcd, which coincidentally we also use etcd as part of our Postgres high availability offering. Then as we were talking to customers, customers needed more industrial grade queuing and brokerage for different types of communication, so we began offering RabbitMQ, and we even use that behind the scenes in our systems. And then they needed bigger data functionality offered by Scylla and a Cassandra-like database, so we started offering Scylla. So that poses a question of why add MySQL? We already had 9 database, we already had a SQL database offering, so why add MySQL? And the answer is it's simple yet powerful. MySQL is simple yet powerful. You get the relational database capabilities, relational model without the high administrative costs that you see with other SQL databases. So you get the relational model, you get, so right here, this is kind of this is a sample query that I've run before where basically what we're doing is we're looking for all the users and the actions that they have done over the past month. So this includes both the select statement, the joins, the filtering, and then we even have a group by, so we have group aggregation. So this combines all the great things about very simple relational models, and you get that with MySQL right out of the box. So it's simple yet powerful, and it's even more expansive than this because MySQL comes with a cross-database querying schema, so you can actually query from database 1 to database 2 within MySQL and then concatenate all those results using a union all. So where other databases like Postgres, to get this type of functionality querying across databases, you have to make some other choices that actually increases complexity. With MySQL, you get this right out of the box. So it exposes a lot of very nice features out of the box without having to increase complexity. So MySQL is very nice. It's a very quick way to get a very good relational database and without having the complexity of some of the other SQL databases. So why else do we want to run MySQL on top of Compose? So every programming language can connect to MySQL. PHP, Python, Golang, C, Ruby, Node.js, R, all of them have very extensive MySQL programming libraries. And most of these have been around so long that they even have 2 MySQL libraries. So PHP had an old model and now it has a new model. Ruby has a MySQL library and then it has a MySQL 2 library. They've gone through these iterations, so they have very mature infrastructure on top of, and very mature experiences running on top of MySQL. So the need within the database systems were there and the capabilities were there within the ecosystems to very quickly spin up MySQL and help customers get started on it. And then there's a large ecosystem of tools. So the most common tools are open source tools like WordPress, Drupal, Sugar CRM, and other CRMs. And then there's GUIs for queries and reporting. So basically the size of the MySQL environment is just compelling. It's been the largest database since the late 90s when web databases started when the open source movement really, I guess, took shape and grew and became and grew into what it is today. MySQL has been there for all of it. And then lastly, why MySQL? Customers were asking for it. We run many types of databases for customers who trust Compose. Customers were asking for a MySQL solution that is highly available and quickly accessible and backed up out of the box and ready to scale, just like all of our databases are. Customers are looking for easy to access high quality database platform with MySQL. So basically what customers get with the rest of Compose, a simple, easily accessible, production-ready database, they wanted that for MySQL also. And so customers were asking for that. And now for a demo. So we're going to walk through a couple of the ways that you can actually get started with MySQL on top of Compose. Let's see. So let's go back into this. So this is the compose.com/MySQL page that I referenced earlier. If you came here, you actually have quick access to the sign up buttons just by clicking the 30 free days and limited deployments. If you have a couple of questions, you can scroll down and see some more of that information as far as reliability and speed, how Compose does auto scaling for your database. So as you add more data, we give your database more resources to continue performing at the level you expect. And then where it's available on top of AWS and SoftLayer and Google Cloud Compute. And then more information about just our process for how we run databases and what we expect from databases as far as high availability and automated disaster recovery and backups, and give you all the niceties that come with Compose. So if you're here and you don't have an account, you can click to the 30 free days unlimited deployment. That should take you to a Compose Create account page, which you'll kick off here. From there, you can move over to. So after this, what happens is you get put over into a Compose UI. This is my personal Compose UI right here. So this is my personal list of databases that I have, and once you log in, you can click Create Deployment in the upper right, and then you will see MySQL down in the beta databases. So let me speak for a moment what a beta database is. So a beta database is a database that Compose has just begun offering. We've begun offering MySQL since late October. What we're doing during this beta time period is we're watching the metrics, monitoring the uptime, seeing how we can improve the uptime, seeing how we can improve self-healing tasks, just see what kind of questions customers are asking about MySQL. So it's we fully expect this to be a production grade database, and we have high expectations during this beta process. However, we want customers to know that this is a new database on top of Compose, and so some of the use cases that customers may have for it, if you want to have questions, or if you have any questions about your use case and how it would work on top of Compose, you can send us questions and we can answer those. And so basically what this is during the beta time frame is information gathering for us to make sure that we're ready to really tell customers the best paths to use different databases within production environments. So we have high expectations even though it's beta. From here we can say, once we have our new MySQL deployment, we can say deployment name, we can create, give your deployment a name. I've got one called MySQL Webinar. We can put it in a location. We can choose any of these locations within our systems. And then we can give it a scale, so we can choose exactly how much data we want to have in there. And then we can click Create Deployment. Now I've already got a database running. It's going to take about 2 or 3 minutes to launch a database, because we actually launched the database to the intended server that you've requested. So as that's spinning up, as that's coming up, what will happen is you'll wait for about 3 or 4 minutes as that database comes up. Once that database comes up, you'll see a screen that looks a lot like this. That will tell you some getting started information here. Below the getting started, you will see some connection information and status information. So MySQL for Webinar, we'll see the version. So we run MySQL 5.7.15. One of the requirements when we were doing the MySQL project was we wanted to run 5.7, and particularly 5.7.11 and higher because of some of the JSON capabilities, some of the niceties and some of the new functions that have been added for the just next iterations on top of MySQL. And then it'll tell you the location. Mine is running on US East 1 on AWS. And then it'll tell you billing and usage information. Below that, we'll have some connection information. We hide our connection string. Let me pull this up, pull up my password. So this, I'm not worried about this. This is just a database used for this webinar. So this is a password for this. So here is the connection string. Once I click show, you can use this connection string to connect from from any of your applications that you're running. From the command line, you can actually take this particular command here, copy it, and move over into a command line where you can have access to the MySQL database, show databases. So there's no information here. I can actually create a database from here, webinar, use webinar. I create table users. Users is kind of a common table, ID, int 11, auto increment, primary key. And then we can give it a name, varchar 255. Okay, show tables. And now we have that new users table. So as you would expect from a database, you get the full MySQL experience on top of Compose. You can connect to it from the command line. You can use it from your applications. That is how we launch. That's how we expect to be able to use databases from Compose. So I've connected that with, and then we have SSL mode. If you're interested in protecting from man-in-the-middle, which is quite common for production apps, you can use this certificate to pin your certificate within your application. So you can use this certificate that is dedicated to your MySQL database to make sure that you're indeed connecting without any kind of issues. Here's the topology, which we'll talk about more later. So it's within MySQL or within Compose, it shows you the health of any particular node. You'll see that you're running 3 data nodes, which we'll talk about, and then you have a proxy node. Down at the bottom, we do have auto scaling. So as you add more data, your RAM will increase, your RAM available will increase. Cost will increase too as you use more of those resources. If you need to scale up faster to get those resources, you can do manual scaling from here. So you can actually choose to scale your deployment manually. So let's pop back over. So this is the basics for getting started with MySQL. Everything on this page after you launch a deployment should get you going with your application in the right direction. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions right now, but if you have any questions, just feel free to pop them in there. All right. Okay, back to the demo. So we've covered the demo. So that's the demo of MySQL. How you would connect with different types of systems. So with PHP, if you're familiar with PHP or if you're using PHP, then you can navigate to this particular URL at the top. It's straightforward. It's the same PHP code that you would use to connect to any database or to any MySQL database. So you get the MySQL connect, you enter the host, and then you'll enter the host. Oh, sorry. You'll enter the host information, and then you'll have the username, password, and then you'll have database information. From here on MySQL, on PHP with MySQL, that will be a host : port. Then you can run queries and just print those queries, print the output of those queries. So it's a native MySQL. We aren't modifying MySQL at all. This is native. This is what you would expect if you started up a production grade MySQL for yourself. Similar with PHP or with Rails. With Ruby on Rails, you would edit your config database. You'd put your host in there. You'd put your username, your password, your port, and then give it a database. These are just kind of some examples to kind of point you in the right direction. But if you're active in those communities, then you'll know precisely how to use MySQL, because really it's just native. So it's a stock MySQL, and I can just use it, right? Well, there is one caveat. Because of the way we run a MySQL cluster, primary keys are required for all tables. So a primary key is the row is a unique identifier for a row. It's typically an integer in MySQL. You can also use UUIDs in MySQL. You can even use strings. But it is going to be a unique identifier for a row within a table, or a record within a table. And what that means is we actually use that for our clustering tool. So our clustering tool, so let's take a step back. So a common place where you wouldn't have a primary key for a table is within join tables. So this is kind of a common pattern. So you have users, those users have an ID, then they also have a name. You have groups, they have an ID and they have a name. But then you're going to have user groups, and so you're going to have a join table of users groups there. And you're going to have a user ID and a group ID. So basically what this allows is it allows you to place multiple users within multiple groups. That's common, just a common join table pattern. But you can't do this within Compose. The reason is it doesn't enable the clustering capability, or it limits our clustering capability. So what you have to do within Compose, which is common within Drupal and WordPress, they actually use some classifications with tags and taxonomies right out of the bat. So what you need to do is alter table, join table, add column ID, just not null, auto increment, and primary key. And so what we do is we add an additional column of ID on the users groups. And what that does is it just it allows a replication to replicate that record and keep the uniqueness of that record known within the system. So this is a caveat, and it's the one thing that makes our MySQL different from a stock MySQL that you would run by yourself. So why did we make that choice, basically? The reason we made that choice is that the caveat powers our replication systems and high availability. It means we can replicate data across 3 nodes for high availability. Because we have these unique records, these unique values for the records within the tables, it means that our replication systems can ensure that data remains consistent across the cluster. It actually becomes quite hard to replicate MySQL data if you don't have the unique records. So it makes it tough. So we actually chose to do this to ensure data consistency for our customers. So what's the power of these 3 nodes? The power of these 3 nodes means that we get 0 downtime maintenance. As you know, if you've run databases before, the #1 reason for a database outage or database downtime is not because the host goes down. It's because you need to do maintenance on the host. You need to either update the systems on the host, maybe the underlying kernel. You need to update just how the host is running. You may need to reset some parameters. So it's kind of that maintenance is the #1 reason for database downtime or outage. We also get 0 downtime backups. MySQL backups are best if you can shut down a data node. So what we actually do during backups is we shut down a data node, back up the data files, and then we bring that node back up. And that gives us the best, most consistent backups. And then we get failover during server outage. So what I said is the #1 reason for a database outage is because of maintenance. The #1 reason for unplanned outage is because of a server failure. So you can plan, so maintenance is for planned outages, failures or server outages is for unplanned outages. The 3 data nodes actually gives us a lot of high availability during these unplanned outages. So that's why we made the caveat of the we were okay with that caveat with the requirement of primary keys on tables is because we received so much because of that trade-off. And we felt like customers would accept that and would actually enjoy that trade-off that they got with the high availability and just better performing database systems. So if we have three data nodes, then how does the customer connect? So what we do at Compose is we try to make it as simple as possible. So the customer's application actually connects to a hub proxy, and then that hub proxy routes to the MySQL data node that is proper. So we simplify, we abstract away some of the three data nodes that you would see into a proxy portal, and then the customer application just can talk to that proxy. So we actually try to take a lot of the magic and a lot of the niceties and a lot of the complexity of MySQL and not necessarily hide it away, but abstract it away and make it as simple as possible for customers to interact with and customers to get the benefits from. So back to the MySQL dashboard. Let's take a look at the topography. So I said I would come back to the topography. Let's see, which is right here. So what you see with the topography is we're actually running health checks on each of these data nodes. So we have healthy on each data node. So we have a MySQL 1840, MySQL 1939. These are just, and they are all running on different hosts within different availability zones. So these three data nodes, any one of them, they're running on their own independent infrastructure. They're running on their own, within their own independent data centers. They're just replicating across the network. Across a secure network that we control. So we have these three data nodes, and these three data nodes, we have a leader among them. So that leader is then replicating to one of the other two data nodes. But what the proxy is actually doing is routing to the proper leader. So we don't have to know all that. That's just kind of telling you how things work. Really, to use Compose, all you have to do is know your host name and port name, and then you have to have access to it. And that gives you the full capabilities of having a highly available MySQL deployment. Let's pull back up the slides. Alrighty. So that was the topography. So we try to expose some of that to it. So long story short, try MySQL for Compose today. You get a 30-day free trial on your first sign up, so you can go in and kick the tires and begin using MySQL just like you would on, if you set it up yourself, except it comes highly available out of the box with backups, with replication, with three data nodes, with and it's just monitored and managed by the people at Compose. So some of those alerts that I showed you earlier, if those start to trigger red, we will actually get some alerts on our back end, and our operations team will investigate and either communicate with you about how to improve performance, or either we will actually go in and make those modifications to improve performance for you. So why choose MySQL? Why did Compose choose MySQL? We chose it because it's simple yet powerful. And that's the end of the presentation. That's just how to get started and how to get going. Thank you today for joining us, and if you have any questions, pop them over in a chat. I'll be happy to answer them. If you have questions that come up later, please email us at support@compose.com, and we'll get back with you. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm going to grab controls. Here, let me just pull up my presentation and get to, like you said, the questions. I put up a couple other email addresses here. So if you have questions specifically for Chris, his email address is there. You can also email us at webinars@compose.com, and for just anything general, happy to reply to you on that. I had one question here, which is, you mentioned in your presentation, you talked about server failures. When a data node restarts, will its data still be available? How do you ensure the data will still be there in sync?
Oh, so that's a great question. So you have the three data nodes. Those data nodes are effectively mirrored replications of your data. I mean, they are replicating data within. So it's not splitting them across 3 nodes, it is 3 mirrors of your data. If one of them goes down, when it comes back up, it will attempt to catch back up with the other 2 members. If those other 2 members have moved too far into the future that that 3rd member cannot catch up, then we actually resync that data from either a backup or from one of the members that remained up during the outage.
Great. Thank you.
And
one
when
other
I say
question.
outage, hold on a second. When I say outage there, I mean outage on that single data node, but a customer in that scenario would not experience an outage.
Great. One other quick question, and I think this is it, unless anybody else has any other questions. We said on the site that MySQL is in beta. What will change when it's taken out of beta?
That's a good question. So what we do as part of Compose is whenever we launch a database, we basically launch on a research project to see how MySQL can run on top of Compose. These are typically 9 to 12 month long research projects. We do a lot of experiments. We do a lot of benchmarking, a lot of testing. We see how we can actually break the systems. So we try to break it as much as possible, and then we make decisions and become comfortable with it, and start putting the databases on top of Compose's infrastructure. And so when we first launch a database into beta, the capabilities that you have are access to the database. So with Compose, you get access to the database, you get monitoring, you get backups, and you get high availability. Those all come stock as part of beta. During this beta process, what we also do is we start adding some other niceties around the database. So as customers, we'll begin adding features to our data browser for MySQL. We'll begin adding, we make sure our documents are up to date, that any questions customers have come to us with, we try to get them into our documents. So really what we try to push out over the beta process is improve the customer's experience with the database that is on top of Compose based on what we learned from what our customers want from that database on top of Compose. So long story short, as we move to production, we try to improve the customer's experience with the database on top of Compose.
Great, thank you. I think that was it. I don't think we have any other questions. So we're going to wrap up today's webinar. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for everyone for attending today's presentation. That concludes the presentation for the day. You can learn more about architecting and optimizing MySQL on our blogs. We have a lot of articles up there. And if you haven't already done so, please try to deploy a trial on Compose and try MySQL for yourself. We will email everybody shortly with a link to the recording. And like I said, if you have any questions, general questions about Compose, email them to webinars@compose. If you have any questions about running your databases in production, email them to support@compose.com. And if you have any questions about today's presentation, you can also email chris@compose.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.